What is the difference between a Super-OSJ and an RIA? That is today's question on the Transition to RIA question and answer series. It is episode number 102. Hi, I'm Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, where I hope you understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition your practice to the RIA model. If you're not already there, if you head on over to transitiontoria.com, you can find all of the resources I make available from this entire series in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers, all kinds of things to help you better understand the model. Again, transitiontoria.com. Okay, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about what is the difference between a so-called Super-OSJ and an RIA, and kind of in the context, if you were to, we're going to kind of go through what the differences, but if you were to maybe join one of them, how do they differ, why you might join one over the other, and what that would kind of look like. So I want to kind of dive in here first with some kind of definitions, if you will. So we'll start with on the what is an OSJ. Now, this kind of verbiage also applies to the employee W-2 model out there. Essentially, what we're going to be talking about today, though, is where the so-called Super-OSJ is typically thought of in the independent broker-dealer model or an independent broker-dealer firm. So just something to keep in mind, we're primarily talking independent broker-dealers here. So for starters, what is an OSJ? So that stands for Office of Supervisory Jurisdiction. That is a FINRA term, and that basically says, hey, broker-dealers, if you're going to have your brokers out in the field, you need to have supervision over those individuals, and they're essentially identified by that branch is an Office of Supervisory Jurisdiction, and OSJ is the terminology that's used for that. And that's why you typically have one of the individuals at that OSJ, at that branch, has a principal license, either the 910 or the 24. They are acting as the principal of the OSJ of that broker-dealer. So that's pretty typical. Depends on how the broker-dealer is set up, depends on how big the broker-dealer is. They literally could have thousands of OSJs out across the country, but each of them are defined from a FINRA perspective, from a broker-dealer perspective, as that Office of Supervisory Jurisdiction, again, supervising the registered reps, the brokers of that office. Now, many of these same folks, these same advisors in this office, these brokers in the office, are also under the broker-dealer's corporate RA. I've done episodes on that as well, where they are both offering to their clients commission account solutions and fee-based solutions to their account. The OSJ terminology essentially primarily applies or almost solely applies just to that broker-dealer side of things when you're wearing that commission hat. So then the question is, well, when does it go from an OSJ to a Super-OSJ? And there's no regulatory definition of what a so-called Super-OSJ is. But basically what happened long ago is some of these OSJs, as I just defined them, slowly started growing, right? So they might have been two advisors, two producing advisors, and again, one of them had a principal license, and then maybe at some point they added another advisor in, and then turns out another advisor came and joined them, and then they kind of realized, oh, wow, we're kind of growing this thing. Maybe we can actually attract advisors into this. And all of a sudden, you have OSJs that went from maybe a small handful of advisors initially and have now grown to dozens and in some cases hundreds of brokers under technically that OSJ. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they are all physically in that same location, but they are fallen under the supervision from a broker-dealer standpoint of that OSJ. So that OSJ is saying, hey, we, on behalf of the broker-dealer, we're the principals here, we will supervise all of these dozens of perhaps hundreds of broker-dealers, or I'm sorry, of brokers that are part of our OSJ. And some of these have grown very large, these Super-OSJs. And at first, this seems like, wow, this is kind of a win all around to have these Super-OSJs. So let me walk you through that, why I say that. For starters, for the broker-dealer, you say, wow, okay, if this OSJ is going to take most of the compliance responsibility, not all, the broker-dealer still has some responsibilities, but if they're going to take most of that direct compliance responsibility for these dozens, if not hundreds of brokers, that's less we have to do at the home office. part of the value proposition of these Super OSJs is also typically, hey, advisor, and you join our Super OSJ, you get to use our specialized team, or however they want to describe it, of operations people to help you, and we will call into the home office on your behalf if there's something that has to get done. So again, the broker-dealer is kind of offloading some of that direct operational support as well. So again, that's good for the broker-dealer. And so there's, and then the kind of a third example, which is a big one, that's a benefit to the broker-dealer, is that Super OSJ is out there recruiting or looking for advisors, like I talked about, to join their Super OSJ. So a broker-dealer naturally wants to grow. And so if they, as opposed to them having to go out and find all these new advisors to maybe bring to the broker-dealer, now the Super OSJ is out there as kind of an extension of the broker-dealer, and they are doing this recruiting out in the marketplace. They are trying to attract advisors. They are bringing them in. And all those assets, even though they kind of on the front end are with that Super OSJ, they're ultimately with that broker-dealer. So that's a benefit to the broker-dealer. So you say, wow, this is a Super OSJ is not a bad thing seemingly at all for a broker-dealer. And I'll tell you where that gets a little tricky here. But like I talked about, kind of a win for most parties, or at least seems like it. So that's the broker-dealer part. How it's a win for the advisors that join these Super OSJs. Part of typically what a Super OSJ gets from the broker-dealer is, as they grow, as that Super OSJ grows, that quote-unquote branch, even though, again, it might be geographically in different places, the bigger they get an aggregate, the higher they go up the payout grid, right, that the broker-dealer has. And so they're no longer just that two-person team that maybe does $1 million in production. They are now doing tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions in production. So they go to the OSJ and say, hey, look, we're this big. You got to give us a higher payout. And so part of the value proposition of a Super OSJ is to say to an advisor, hey, advisor, you join our Super OSJ as opposed to going directly to the broker-dealer. And again, we have arguably better support that you would get as opposed to going directly to them, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things they would pitch is to say, hey, advisor, or hey, team, because we get this much higher payout because we're so big, we're able to in turn give you a higher payout than you could get on your own going directly to the broker-dealer. So that's a plus for the advisor from a payout perspective, to say, wow, I actually, because I'm, and maybe it's a decent sized advisor, but it's nowhere near the size of the Super OSJ. So the Super OSJ gets a better deal, passes along a part of that to the advisor. And in many cases, it's, hey, that's better than you could get going directly to the broker-dealer. And then, of course, the third prong of the kind of the win-win-win is the Super OSJ itself. So they're doing this to make money. So part of what they do is they essentially take a spread. So they get this higher payout from the broker-dealer because of how big they are. They give something less than that to the advisor, which again still might be better than that advisor could get directly, and they're making a spread. Hence, it's profitable for the Super OSJ as well. So you might think, wow, when broker-dealers just want lots of these Super OSJs, and this seems to be a win for everyone. And again, in many instances, it is a good thing, as I just went through. The challenge that we've seen over the last couple of years is that as these Super OSJs get larger and larger, there's more and more friction between the Super OSJ and the broker-dealer. And that's primarily, I don't want to point fingers at the Super OSJ, but the challenge is, as that Super OSJ gets bigger and bigger, they typically demand more and more from the broker-dealer. So whether that's a higher and higher payout, or more support, or whatever the case, resources from the broker-dealer that's given to them. And because that Super OSJ has got so big and is such a meaningful amount of revenue for that broker-dealer, the Super OSJ can kind of politely threaten, hey, broker-dealer, if you are not able to accommodate our requests for what we're asking for here, keep in mind, we could always leave and go to some other broker-dealer, and they would love our business because look how much revenue we generate for you. And that's a slippery slope, because the Super OSJ is doing what, I mean, it's a for-profit business. They are trying to have the best experience and best resources and best payout for their advisors. So it's reasonable for them to do that. But you can also understand, whereas a broker-dealers still have costs. Broker-dealers still need to be able to supply, resources at scale. They need to be able to make a profit. So as they get squeezed, this becomes an increasing friction point. And so what we've seen over the last decade or so, and I think this trend is going to continue, is a lot of the remaining super OSJs at these broker dealers, and again, that OSJ, super OSJ is under the independent broker dealers, broker dealer and their corporate RIA. They're saying, hey, maybe this isn't working out as good as it did at one point, and maybe both sides are saying that, and that super OSJ is actually essentially breaking away and starting their own RIA. So as opposed to remaining under the corporate RIA of the broker dealer, they're saying, hey, we're actually going to go start our own RIA. But in many cases, and not always, it doesn't always work out like this. Hey, but broker dealer, we do still have a lot of our advisors that have a need for commission solutions, so we would still like to use you as the broker dealer side of things. And if we can make that work, we're happy to do that. But otherwise, we're starting our own RIA, and we're going to kind of go in a different direction here. That's essentially not good for the broker dealer from a revenue standpoint, because you're taking this huge amount of, perhaps billions of advisor and client assets away, particularly if you take them elsewhere, which I'm going to get into the benefits of what that super OSJ gains by becoming an RIA, and how that could be detrimental to the broker dealer. So just keep in mind, that is the evolution. I think that will continue, that any of the remaining very large super OSJs at independent broker dealers that are under the broker dealer, under the corporate RIA, I think they will all, maybe I guess I shouldn't say all, but there's perhaps exceptions. Most will one day start their own RIA. And potentially, if that independent broker dealer also has a custodial channel at their firm, they might even say, hey, we're going to start our own RIA, and we'd like to keep these assets with you in your custodial channel. And so that would be ideal, but they might also take the assets elsewhere. So that's a quick primer, or maybe not so quick, on OSJs and super OSJs. So then the question is, kind of how does that compare to an RIA? So keep in mind, if a standalone RIA, whether you start it, the super OSJ starts it, whoever starts it, if that RIA, all the advisors as part of that RIA do not have any need to handle commission or broker-dealer assets, and so they are 100% fee only, which is quite typical with many RIAs, but not all, they don't need a broker-dealer affiliation at all, right? They are just an RIA. They go out, like I've talked about in plenty of episodes, and they go out and put all their solutions together, and they have custodians and all that sort of thing, and they don't need a broker-dealer at all. So the terminology OSJ would not apply at all to that 100% fee-based RIA, because, again, OSJ is a FINRA term related to broker-dealers. So when a standalone RIA, again, not an OSJ at all, but keep in mind, even that, and there's kind of two things, whether an RIA is started, and I have this conversation all the time, that folks say, hey, I'm thinking about starting my own RIA, but I do have this large, commission business still that's still meaningful to the practice. Oftentimes it's variable annuities that are sitting there paying a trail. It makes sense to leave the client in those positions, but that's generated maybe a couple $100,000 a year in trails. And again, it makes sense maybe to keep the client in those. So, hey, if I'm going to start my own RIA, I still need some way to essentially solve for that. And so I've done several episodes on how you can solve for that commission part of it. And often that might involve using a so-called RIA-friendly broker-dealer, which just very quickly, the model there is they say, hey, we're the RIA-friendly broker-dealer. We realize, hey, you want to have your own RIA? Great, go start it. Keep your assets wherever you want. We just want to get the commission assets that you have, and we pay, here's our payout for it, and here's kind of our policies and procedures of how we work with you, and granted, you have this RIA over here. And so that's their model. And so in that sense, you still have some tie to a broker-dealer. And for that perhaps very large RIA, whether it's homegrown as an RIA or that super OSJ that has evolved and started their own RIA, there might be dozens or hundreds of advisors that still need that commission solution. And so even with a standalone RIA, that commission part of it, arguably you could still call for with respect to that RIA-friendly broker-dealer, that broker-dealer might still consider, oh yeah, they are a super OSJ of ours, of the RIA-friendly broker-dealer, because they handle perhaps dozens or hundreds of brokers on our behalf as essentially as the super OSJ. Again, even though they're their own RIA, that's on the advisory side, the fee-based assets. This is talking about with respect to the commission assets. So the term could still be thrown around. It's not typically, if there's a standalone RIA, whether it's small or very large, if there's some sort of broker-dealer component, in theory, you could talk about there's an OSJ, because again, the same thing applies. The broker-dealer has to supervise the registered reps, but you typically don't, it's just not, that's not verbiage that's typically used. Again, we're just talking about an RIA and typically say, oh, and they have a friendly broker-dealer relationship. But it, in theory, would apply. So just a couple benefits of why that Super-OSJ might transition out from under the corporate RIA, like I talked about, and start their own RIA, and how that could benefit you. So if you were looking at, hey, should I join a Super-OSJ that is under the broker-dealer's BD and corporate RIA, that's an option. Or should I join one of these firms that has their own RIA and they have this RIA-friendly broker-dealer solution for those folks, those advisors that have a need for that? You know, some of the differences of that, and it's not to say that there aren't still perhaps good Super-OSJs that are under a BD and corporate RIA. I don't want to make a blanket statement here as I give you some of the benefits of going in this direction, or going in the other direction. But you would want to flesh out what their value prop is, and does it overcome some of the benefits I'm about to point out here. So that RIA that breaks away, that Super-OSJ that merges into their own RIA, for starters, one of the things they can now do is they can become multi-custodial. So when they were under the BD's corporate RIA, in almost all circumstances, they can only use that. They have to keep all of their advisors, have to keep all of their clients' assets at that broker-dealer. Even on the fee-based side, they're all housed at that broker-dealer. And you don't have a choice. You can't go to your clients and say, hey, we have 3 custodians. Here's why you might open it at one custodian or this custodian. Hey, it doesn't make any difference to me as the advisor. Which would you like to do, client? You can't do that in most all cases, as a Super-OSJ that's under a corporate RIA. When they break away and have their own RIA, all of a sudden they can be multi-custodial, and most typically do. Again, they might, if that broker-dealer they were with, a Super-OSJ previously, if that broker-dealer also has a custodial channel, the typical path is normally they'd go to that broker-dealer and say, hey, we are going to go in a new direction. Maybe it's best for both of us, but for the benefit of the relationship, benefit of an easier transition, we would like to take our existing advisory assets that are with you and just keep them at your custodial channel. And why they might not point it out, that yes, over time, we are going to add a couple other custodians. We'll eventually grow assets over there. But we would like to be able to keep the assets here. That will be easier for our advisors, our clients during this transition. That's typically how it happens. There's a couple exceptions out there where that hasn't happened, and the broker-dealer says, this relationship is just not working anymore. So obviously, we can't stop you from going in this new direction, but we're just going to end our relationship, and you're not going to use our custodial channel either. That has happened as some of these firms have kind of migrated, right? But that's more the exception than the norm. Another example when that Super-OSJ becomes their own RIA is more technology options out there that they can use. And so when they were under that corporate RIA, typically, in most instances, they're either just simply using or required to use that broker-dealer's technology, which is often proprietary technology and maybe a proprietary CRM. And the reality is the fintech world has expanded so dramatically that there's all kinds of wonderful fintech solutions out there that in many cases, not all, but in many cases, that Super-OSJ, while they're still kind of captive under that corporate RIA, are not able to offer their advisors to use. If they go in a different direction and start their own RIA, they can go out, and because the RIA part has nothing to do with the broker-dealer, they can go out and use whatever technology they want to use. So that can be another benefit to advisors and ultimately their clients. And then the final example I'll just give, this is not an exhaustive list of one of the reasons, again, that a Super-OSJ might break away to their own RIA, is they can also typically access more investment solutions. So while that Super-OSJ was under the corporate RIA, typically they are only allowed to access perhaps, say, SMA managers that are on that broker-dealer's SMA platform that they've curated however many money managers, and they say, hey, here's what you're allowed to use. As an RIA, they can go out and access different ways to access, often through TAMPs. I've done an episode on that, where they can access perhaps hundreds or more of different sort of investment solutions that they can offer to their advisors to use with their clients. That's always going to be more flexible. That universe of available solutions is going to be bigger. under the RIA model versus if that super OSJ was under a corporate RIA, which granted the corporate RIAs still have very vast, usually the bigger broker-dealers at least, set of solutions, but it is still generally always going to be smaller set, even if it's fairly large, it's always still going to be smaller than what an RIA could just go out and tap in the marketplace on their own. So the point of all that is just to help you understand the differences between a so-called super OSJ and an RIA, to help you understand why we're seeing super OSJs kind of merge out to become their own RIAs, to know why those RIAs are doing that, and then ultimately for you, if you're evaluating where it might make more sense, and I talk about this a lot of episodes, perhaps starting your own RIA is a solution for you. But for many advisors, joining an existing solution is a better path for them. And that's something I help advisors think through all day long. And so if that's you, if we conclude, hey, for X, Y, and Z, it might make more sense for you to join an existing solution, you have those options. You have those super OSJs that still exist out there that you could look at and hear out their value props. But you also have these RIAs. So whether it's RIAs out there that have, again, transitioned out from being they were originally a super OSJ, or RIAs that were started from scratch to attract advisors, and there's some very compelling value propositions out there. Just know that there are differences in what each of those paths can provide for you. Again, I don't want to make a blanket statement that the RIA is always better than super OSJ, because I'm sure there's some decent value propositions out there for some super OSJs, but just know there are differences between them, and you would want to dive into those details as part of your due diligence while considering these different pathways. So with that, I hope that has helped you kind of at least better understand some of this jargon, this terminology, how that might apply. It can get very confusing when you're maybe talking to someone, and perhaps if they're trying to woo you or attract you to their solution, or they're dropping some of this verbiage. So hopefully this has helped in that regard and kind of clarified and kind of make you better understand how it all works. As I said at the top, my name is Brad Wales with Transition to RIA. And if you head on over to transitiontoria.com, you can find all of the resources I make available from this entire series in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers, all kinds of things to help you better understand the RIA model. And at the top of every page is a contact link. If you click on that, you can instantly and easily schedule time to have a one-on-one conversation with me, whether you want to talk about today's topic or anything else RIA related. I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Again, transitiontoria.com. And with that, I hope you found value in today's episode, and I'll see you on the next one.